I'm going to call to order the regular meeting of the Caroline County Planning and Zoning Commission for June 18th, 2026. I would like to start with the introductions. To my immediate right this evening is Mr. Lee Tingler, representing the Madison District, Mr. J.D. Young, representing the Reedy Church District, Mr. Steve Rollins for the Mattaponi District. I am Richard Williams for the Western Caroline. Next to me, to my immediate left, is Dr. Carol Horton with the Port Royal District, and our newest member is Mary Hodge from the Bowling Green District. And welcome, Mary. And on staff tonight, we have Leon Hughes as the director, Mr. Brad Robinson, the zoning administrator. Sorry, Brad. We have Craig Pennington, the planner, and Max Salavin, the county attorney. And we would like to, if we could, please stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Of the county. In your son, Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I would like to make a motion to, for the approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Any additions or changes or corrections? Did anybody notice anything? No. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second. I have Mr. Young approving the minutes and Mr. Rollins seconding them. Thank you both very much. Yeah, I'm sorry. We need to vote on all those in favor. Say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Motion to approve. Thank you. Public hearing.
The purpose of a public hearing is for the Caroline County Planning Commission to listen carefully to the verbal expression and position and opinion from the citizens of Caroline County. Public hearings are not question and answer sessions or debates, and all statements should be addressed to the chair. When members of the public offer comment, they need to clearly state their name and voting district prior to making their comments. Persons speaking at public hearings are respectfully requested to keep comments brief, not to exceed 3 minutes, and to address only those items pertinent to the matters advertised for public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Pennington. Is there anybody wishing to speak? Oh, Leon, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Bring it on, Leon.
So good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This public hearing for case TXT 032602 is for amendments to the zoning ordinance to address new legislation passed by the General Assembly that will become effective on July 1, 2026. The focus of these proposed amendments are new requirements that require localities to allow consideration for solar facilities via the special exception process in the agricultural, industrial, institutional, business, and mixed-use districts. The legislation also prescribes regulations for setbacks, fencing, the height of solar panels, the mitigation of visual impacts, light intensity, erosion and stormwater, ground cover, compliance with state and federal employment laws, and the allowance for and it also allows for written agreements for decommissioning of the facilities. A companion law related to energy storage requires that energy storage facilities be allowed as a by right accessory use in any approved project, in any area of an approved project for a solar facility. There is language in the new law that notes that these facilities may only be regulated by ordinances that are in place on July 1 of 2026. In short, if the county was to approve a solar facility after July 1, any ordinance that prescribed requirements related to the accessory energy battery storage facility that is now a by right use must have been adopted by July 1. Your packet includes copies of the legislation. Staff and the county attorney have been working to prepare these proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance to ensure compliance with the new legislation. To accomplish compliance, the amendments are proposed that will insert solar facilities into the uses allowed by special exception in each of the required zoning districts. We've also amended the definition sections with amendments to some of the existing definitions and added some new definitions as prescribed by the new legislation. And we are re-adopting section 23 of the zoning ordinance that had been repealed by the county. The new section 23 requires changes to comport with the new legislation. So it is just not a readoption of what the county previously had, because that was not in compliance with the new law. So but it is the basis for a lot of the new section 23. The most notable changes is that we removed the overlay district boundary language and the removal of items that were in conflict with the requirements as prescribed by the new legislation related to setbacks, fencing, and screening, and etc. The proposed section 23 now includes a section related to decommissioning and a section that governs energy storage facilities. In addition to these code amendments, staff will recommend amendments to the comprehensive plan to add policy guidance related to solar facilities. Some of the changes that were previously in the solar ordinance should be considered for inclusion as policy in the comp plan. I'm going to provide an overview of the proposed amendments, and I must point out that the document that I'll be presenting to you tonight is different than the document that was in your packet. It includes some updates, some formatting changes, and some additional items based on comments from staff. You have the new document at your seats, and there are also copies of this document that we're going to talk about tonight in the back if anyone wants to grab a copy. Most of the changes that are from your packet to tonight, though, are mainly kind of cleanup items. The formatting was pretty bad, and there were some numbering errors in the old ordinance, so we did a lot of work working on those things. So we will start with the Article 2, which is the definition section. And so what you have is a clean version. We didn't want to put the red line version up because it's pretty difficult to read. But the first is agrivoltaics. There's a new definition for agrivoltaics. And I'm not going to read every single item on that screen. So I'm just going to run through the list. There's also amendments to the definition of data center with some additional language there related to energy generation systems for data centers. We struck some language related to natural area and added the photovoltaic language there. We also created, in conformance with the law, the definition for private energy generation facility. We also made some amendments to the public generation energy generation facility with the excluding of solar voltaic projects. We amended or added the small portable solar generation device, which is in a definition prescribed by the state code. We've also added solar facility accessory as a new definition. And we have also added solar voltaic project which is prescribed by the code, and we've added a definition for substation. We created that definition because previously it was just kind of lumped into some prior definitions, and this calls it out as a prescribed use, which allows makes it clear as to where it is a permitted use and what process. Essentially, any substation now, where they had been by right, will now have to go through the special exception process. So any questions at this point, or do we just keep going? Okay. So we are correct. Can you go back? Let's start at the top. So this is the Rural Preservation District. Here we amended some language there in the purpose and intent section of the RP district. And one of the other things that you'll notice, or may not notice, but we have alphabetized all of our uses in all of our districts, just to make it a little bit easier to use. Before, it was just kind of, when something was adopted, it was just added to the list, but alphabetizing the list makes it a lot easier to use for those who have to use it. We also included I think that was the big change. And we excluded the use from that district as well. So in Article 5, the Agricultural Preservation District, here we amended the ordinance, or this article, adding the use of solar and energy, photovoltaic energy storage facilities and substation as special uses as prescribed by the code. We did the same in the business district, where we added those uses as special uses. Also in the industrial district, we added the uses as special uses, and we also added private energy facilities as special uses. Private energy generation facility, and I think it's public utilities. Did I include that? I was looking for the addition of public utilities, but I don't see that there. See private energy, solar voltaic, and substations as special uses in the industrial district, as they should be also in the B district. And then in the mixed use district, we also added the uses as special exceptions for energy storage facilities and substations. So those are also in the planned shopping center district. The use was added as a special use in that district as well. And then in the planned industrial park, the use was also added as well. And all of those changes are prescribed by the Code of Virginia. Those changes, comport directly with what the new legislation requires us to do in terms of adding those uses to those districts. And also in the planned industrial PERT, Plan Innovation Research and Technology Park. The uses were added as special exceptions as well. So I think the, can we go to section 23? So this is probably the meat of what we have amended or adding to the ordinance. You all may recall Caroline had adopted a solar ordinance back in 2021, and then repealed that ordinance, I think about a year or so later. And so after repealing that ordinance, solar projects were essentially not allowed within the county's boundaries. And so in response to the new legislation and the fact that, you know, we have to have a process now that they be reviewed under the special exception process, we are reinstating this section of the code, section 23, and section 1, you know, identifies the purpose and intent for solar voltaic projects, and it has submission requirements for projects that are listed there. It also has design and development standards, and those speak to buffer areas, landscaping, fencing, grading of new impervious surfaces, land disturbing activities, signage, height, site access, and some other specific requirements that all comport with the new code. One of the things that we had to do when bringing this ordinance back was make amendments that would not be afoul of the guidance that was laid down by the new legislation. And in your packet, you had copies of that legislation, and it talked about, you know, the specific things that would be allowed to be governed through the special exception process. The other thing that we amended in this section is relates to decommissioning. We have provided language there that lays out the decommissioning process for solar facilities. And then we still have a, you know, site plan requirement and requirements for items that are in the, should be submitted with a site plan. There's also a provision that relates to commencement of construction of these projects. There's a 12-month window that applicants have to commence construction on projects at the end there. Then also now in section 23, is section 2 that is specific to energy storage facilities. And these requirements, like I said, are specific to those accessory uses that would essentially be a by right use if a solar facility is approved in the county. Now, and I want to caveat the fact that the legislature requires that we have a process for reviewing solar projects via the special exception process. There is no caveat that they be approved. We just have to have a process that they go through. And so if there is a project that comes along that does not comport with the community standards and the guidance provided in the comp plan, or may not have a 2232 compliance, then the commission could recommend denial and the board could ultimately deny a project. So I just want to be clear that the fact that we are required to review them through the special exception process does not mean that they have to be approved. I just wanted to make that clear. The legislature said, create a process for review, take them through that process, and then make a determination essentially on a case-by-case basis. But in no way does it say you have to approve a solar project. I just wanted to be clear about that. So in this section, we also have application requirements. We have that include a project description. We have requirements for a generalized development plan, which is consistent with our current process. We also require that they do include a preliminary decommissioning plan. You can see the items that it requires there. And then item 4 is an encouragement for a community meeting. So last year, legislation was passed that we could not require community meetings. And so this language here is that we encourage applicants to hold a community meeting. And I think that's important because I think it allows the community an opportunity to meet the applicants and understand what the applicants are proposing and get an opportunity to have questions answered in advance of a public hearing. I don't think the public hearing process is the best place for citizens to get their first chance to ask questions of an applicant, just because of the format with the time limits and it's kind of a formal setting. I'm a big proponent of community meetings and I encourage them always for large cases and even small cases because there's a opportunity to get information directly from the applicant and have an opportunity to learn and understand and pose tough questions or to those applicants, and also have an opportunity to figure out any type of mitigation that may not be shown in an initial plan, to inquire about how you're going to handle or mitigate a potential impact. So, like I said, it is in there as an encouragement, as the code does not allow us to require it. And then under 23-9, there's a section that is the requirements for all energy storage facilities, and there's quite a long list of items there that applicants will have to meet as a part of a facility, and they range from including maps of watersheds that may be impacted by runoff from a project, identify the location and distances to all wells within a half-mile radius of the project's boundary. It includes requirements for the runoff that it be contained from the project, preventing from any harmful materials from leaving the site. It also requires an operation and maintenance manual. It requires a noise study that demonstrates the operation of the facility would be in compliance with the Caroline County Noise Ordinance. All individual battery storage containers shall be insulated with an acid-proof liner and placed on a type V concrete or equivalent type concrete pad that has a containment base at least 3 feet wider than the container and have a depth of 6 inches, that connects to a central drainage system that connects to a containment facility that is lined with an acid-proof material to prevent leaching of materials. If the batteries produce sulfuric acid, then the containment facility shall be enclosed to prevent the escape of vapors. And that is a design with the intent that if there's ever an event at a facility and either rain or depending on the type of technology, it will potentially more likely be rain, or maybe the suppression system that is inside might be a liquid type suppression system, that if there was a hole in that overall container, which essentially looks like a shipping container, that's the best description, that any of that material would leak into the containment pad and then drain into a containment facility, so that it wouldn't ultimately end up in the ground and ultimately into the watershed. So that is the intent there. Because we have there could be some significant environmental impacts if that was to occur. So there's also a requirement for monitoring, and if there's an event, there's a requirement that a isolation zone of 300 feet be provided around that area. Each battery storage container shall be have a minimum of 50-foot separation from one another. So you would have, you know, a container here, and then another 50 feet, you'd have another container. And the theory there is that if there was an event, you would hopefully prevent the heat from spreading to the adjacent containers, causing, you know, a catastrophic event. There's also a requirement for air ventilation and suppression systems for indoor and outdoor installations. All energy storage facilities will comply with all the provisions of NFPA 855 as amended. Each battery storage container or building shall install and maintain fire safety systems with automatic alarms, detection systems, and extinguishing technology built in, approved by the Caroline County building official, and designed in accordance with the NFPA 855 standards as amended and the Virginia statewide fire prevention code. There's also a requirement here, which is kind of a catch-all, is any requirements that are essential for public safety of an existing or proposed facility, building, or structure, or the safety of the occupants thereof that are not specifically provided for by this code shall be determined by the Caroline County building official. And then under 13, there's a requirement for an emergency action plan, which is approved by the fire chief, which includes a number of items there. And at the end of this presentation, the fire chief is here and is going to do a presentation to you all regarding the technology and some of the concerns that may be raised about battery storage facilities. So in that emergency action plan is procedures for safety shutdown, de-energizing, and isolation of equipment and systems under the emergency conditions. There's also plans for personal injuries and a safe startup after a facility has gone offline, procedures for annual inspection, and these are things that they have to provide. So, procedures for annual inspection and testing of associated alarms, interlocks, and controls. The procedures to be followed in response to notification of systems alarms are out of range, conditions that could slightly or potentially be dangerous. That would include, they would have to have provisions that would include shutting down the equipment, summoning service or repair personnel, and providing agreed upon notification to the fire department personnel. It also requires emergency procedures to be followed in case of fire, explosion, release of liquids or vapors, or damage to the critical moving parts or other potentially dangerous conditions. Also requires a response for considerations similar to a safety data sheet that will address response safety concerns and extinguishment, even if the SDS is not required by another code or standard. Procedures for handling energy storage system equipment damaged in a fire or other emergency event, including contact information for personnel qualified to safely remove damaged storage systems equipment from the facility. Procedures and schedules for conducting drills and training exercises for local first responders, and a plume analysis and an RCA post-fire large leak hazard material release thermal runaway and owners. Oh, I think that's a typo. I'm sorry. Yeah, at the owner's expense. Yeah, there's a word missing there in that sentence. Essentially, what that line is intended to say that if there's anything that happens, the remediation and everything will be conducted at the owner's expense. There's also a physical analysis report that will be included as part of an application which identifies economic impacts, local government tax revenue, potential utilization of labor, and construction of local apprenticeships, the economic impact methodology, a real estate value impact study for nearby properties, risk and uncertainties, methods to improve the project financial and employment impacts, and an executive summary in the report. Then at the end, in the event that there's an event, there's a root cause analysis with corrective actions shall be required prior to the restart after a partial or full facility emergency shutdown, which shall identify the cause of system or facility failure and corrective actions to be taken to prevent reoccurrence. And then there are additional items. The operator shall complete the root cause analysis that includes a review of all systems, components, subcomponents, design, manufacture, maintenance, and operations of the facility. The analysis shall indicate whether any affected components or subcomponents are in use elsewhere in the county. The operator shall perform corrective actions based on the analysis. A report shall be submitted to the county describing actions taken to prevent the reoccurrence of the incident, and a copy of the root cause analysis report shall be given to the Board of Supervisors. The operator shall be fully responsible for remediation and all costs associated with response and remediation that was the result of an incident. So essentially that places financial responsibility for remediation on the applicant/owner. And then there's a requirement there also for a post-construction noise study that indicates that noise coming from the site should be at 50 dBA. And then we've also added at the end there, item 3 under section 2310 for substations. And then it relates to setbacks for substations. And substations should have the following minimum setbacks from existing dwellings, schools, churches, and public rights-of-way. 500 feet for principal structures of the substation or connector station, and 250 feet for inverters and transformers. And then there's a caveat there that the board may modify setbacks as part of a special exception or as it deems necessary to ensure adequate buffer yards and screening to mitigate the visibility of substations from the exterior of the property to occupied residential properties, public facilities, places of worship, and public rights of way, and site conditions specific to the project. So that is an overview. I will say there was a question or something that we caught later in the document. We had left out the use as a special exception in the RP district. And so it is there in this draft. So there's a lot, and I'm happy to answer any questions because I'm sure there are some. And so I'm at the pleasure of the commission is how you want to walk through this for understanding and additions as well, if you have any.
May I speak? Well, Mr. Hughes, I really feel kind of like put under the bus because I was given a copy in my packet. I went through everything thoroughly, read it, and now I've just been given a totally new document here tonight. You know, nobody had the courtesy to email it to us, any of us, so we could review it last night. And I see there's an email from REC, copy John Hua, who's like the head of the CEO of REC, as well as Charlie Payne. And they're inserting language in this also, and I see it in there.
Well, I would say this. As I said at the beginning, we were working on this until today, and it's not a completely new document from what you received in your packet. There are some additions, no deletions to anything that was in the original packet. And so, you know, it's unfortunate that we are put in this position that, you know, there's a lot of work to have to go through and make sure things are compliant. But I can tell you, the document you received in your packet is not materially different than the document that we talked about tonight. But I do appreciate your concern about, not being able to review it until today.
I mean, that's really not quite fair. So
I would agree. And the thing I would say that is the position that the General Assembly has put us in. And so I agree 100% that it's not fair.
okay. So what would you consider public utilities transmission and distribution? Like that's included in,
So those facilities
that's a permitted use
in which district?
in RP? Section 2, number 11. Public utilities transmission and distribution, excluding substations.
So are you looking at the new document or the old?
Yeah, the new document.
So in the RP district, under permitted principal uses and structures, item 10, I'm sorry. Item 10,
11. You said 11.
no, it's item
Was it
10.
item 11 that you're referring to?
Yes.
11.
So if you look at our definition of public utilities, in Article 2, I'm going to include the Okay. So under public utilities in the ordinance, there is a definition of public utilities distribution. Those items necessary to distribute public utility services, including poles, lines, distribution, transformers, pipes, meters, or other facilities necessary for the provision and maintenance of such utilities. Public utilities include water and sewage facilities. And then public utilities generation are those facilities used in the manufacture or development of electric power for sale to the public. And then public facilities transmission are facilities and other normal distribution facilities, pipes, meters, and water and sewage facilities. So those are what those items are. You see, we have 3 distinct definitions there in the definition section for transmission, distribution, and then it's added there excluding substations, because now substations is a specific use. So previously, without that definition of substation, substations could have been a by right use. So now they are not a by right use.
Well, I know you modeled a lot of the ordinance against Isle of Wight, so they wanted to ban battery storage everywhere except where it's allowed by right with solar. Are all these zoning definitions doing the same for Caroline in our language?
Yeah, I would say it was not this ordinance is not modeled off the Isle of Wight. We looked at the Isle of Wight ordinance, but it's not a model of that ordinance. And so, solar is not banned. It is allowed by special exception in the uses that are required in the districts that are required by the code.
But how are we excluding battery storage from
Because-
elsewhere in the county?
Because battery storage is not an enumerated use. I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. So battery storage is not an enumerated use anywhere in the county. Battery storage is only allowed on approved solar projects in accordance with the Code of Virginia. So there's not a use that says battery storage is allowed in any district.
But it will be allowed by a special exemption.
No. There's no provision for battery storage at all as a standalone use.
So it's only allowed by right with solar?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Regarding the separation, 50 feet currently is, and I'd like to hear from our fire expert,
Mhm.
but should we expand that to 100 feet to guarantee no thermal bleed?
Well, I won't speak for the chief, but that's kind of how we came up with 50 feet because we felt like that was a sufficient separation. We've seen others. I mean, you could certainly consider 100 feet, but we had seen some facilities that had a lot less. We visited a Dominion facility that had a little bit less than that, and so we felt like 50 was an adequate separation.
Okay. Regarding also, as far as the studies are concerned, and this might sound a bit silly, but I remember reading about a building in London that had a curvature to its glass and it ended up cutting its neighbor almost in half because of the glare, almost like a magnifying glass in ants when you were a kid. Are there any studies to make sure that neighboring properties are not affected in a similar way to this?
From solar facilities?
If you angle the panel just so and catch the light, it acts like a giant magnifier.
Well, so in those situations, that is probably a metallic or silver type material. The solar panels are black,
Mm.
and so they absorb the heat and don't necessarily create a reflection. Of course, you'll get some minor reflection at a specific angle, but you won't get anything that would be that intense off of a solar panel, a black solar panel.
Okay.
And if it pleases the commission, I'd like to ask the chief to come up and do his presentation as well, because I'm sure it would answer some of the questions that you all have, and he is the expert.
One quick follow-up before he takes. REC is asking on page 97, Article 11, public utilities and generation to private energy generation also. Is REC considered a private entity or are they a public utility?
Max, I'll defer to you as to exactly how they're defined.
It's not exactly their status as whether they're private or public. It's how they would be classified within the use category in the zoning ordinance. So it is defined as facilities used to manufacture, development, sale to the public. And so their generation facilities are public utility generation facilities,
Okay.
despite whatever their status
So-
as a co-op. Or,
We wouldn't necessarily need to change it to private energy to allow for REC to handle new transmission
correct.
facilities.
They
and
would,
whatnot.
their use would still fall within what's public.
Okay.
The private energy generation is for generating energy for use on that specific property,
Got it.
not
Thank
for
you.
sale to the public or the grid.
Thank you.
Chief? What? Clicker. Yeah, clicker. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, good evening. If it would be okay, I'd like to answer Mr. Tigner's question about the distances. There you go. Okay, so your question about 50 feet, it's kind of a balance, all right? As you can see, this is in Virginia, this is in Rockingham County. These are all battery storage containers, and you can see they're pretty tight, all right? This is also in Virginia, and you can see they're separated by a pretty good distance, probably not 50 feet, but as we go beyond 50 feet, the site gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So we try to modify what's going to be safe for us to get in there and what's going to give you the smallest footprint for a site. So.
But is 50 feet going to allow you guys and your equipment in there safely enough without concern about corners or stretching hoses or anything like that?
Yeah, so number one, we don't want to go in there. And so if you look at this site, the way the fire suppression works here is you tie into a standpipe and then it gets piped to that container and that container gets flooded. We're not going in between those. You're dealing with a lot of energy, ground radiant, electric, and a lot of other hazards. We don't want to put our people in there. The distance is simply to prevent thermal runaway to the next unit. We can do that by flooding the first unit with that. So I'm not an advocate of the first picture here. That's just too tight. There's no way, you know, the heat and smoke can dissipate before it starts heating that next container. That's really tight, in my opinion. So we went with that 50 feet. Some of the codes are much, much shorter, like 3 feet and 5 feet. So depending on the size of the battery itself. So 50 feet was a good modification for us.
So is there a mechanism there for to flood those units before you get there?
Absolutely. I mean, they could have a fire suppression system in them, right? Sprinkler system. Most of the outdoor units, they don't require that in the codes that we'll go over today, but we made sure it was put in the ordinance that they would have a system approved by the building official for that purpose. And no matter what, even if we flood it, it's not going to go out, depending on the chemistry of the battery, and we'll talk about that. But it is going to help contain the heat from going to the next container, and that's all we're really trying to stop it. We're not going to put it out. We had a Tesla fire here not long on I-95. You know, it took 4,000 gallons just to get it so we could get it off 95. So it has to burn itself out. But again, making sure nothing else catches on fire to the right, to the left of that container.
Is there a system that would put it out?
No.
So there's no like halon system or anything like that?
No. You know, it all really comes down to your battery chemistry. And most of the time we're going to talk about lithium phosphate. It's going to generate its own heat, its own oxygen. It's a self-oxidizer. It'll burn underwater. So we just got to wait it out and keep it cool. Yeah. As Mr. Hughes says, I am the fire and EMS chief for the county, but tonight I'm going to talk to you on a different hat, and that is the coordinator of emergency management. And the county's emergency management function is designed to manage large-scale disasters. And if we had a battery storage facility here and we had a problem, it would require resources outside of our community, outside of our fire department, our sheriff's office. And so it would really be an emergency management function for us. And emergency management doesn't look at things that are going well. We look at things when they're going to go bad. And we'll talk about what we're looking at battery storage and energy storage in particular. Emergency management follows this progression you see behind you. I don't know if you have it on your screens. And it's basically the system of emergency management. First and foremost is prevention, which we're doing right now is zoning and your ordinances, the work that you're doing today and that you'll produce. The second piece of that is mitigation. And that's really our codes and standards, engineering controls, risk assessment, hazard mitigation analysis. And I'll talk more about those in a minute. Preparedness. Again, training our folks and our responders to make sure we have a solid response plan. And that is not the county's responsibility. That is the battery storage facility's responsibility. Obviously, response is when there is an issue and we show up. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, is recovery. And Mr. Hughes talked about an RCA, which is a root cause analysis.
if a facility has a problem, we are going to require that they review it. We find out what happened, why it happened, why you're having an incident, whether it's a large incident or a small incident, to really prevent those in the future. But all of the incidents, especially in battery storage, lead to an environmental problem, right? And that is why I say that's the biggest issue for us. It leaves a lasting impact on the county. All battery storage, I'm going to use the word battery storage, it's really energy storage. Batteries are electrochemical devices, right? There are energy storage systems out there that don't require electrochemical. We're going to look at them in 4 main areas here, and we're going to look at it across any spectrum of danger for us. Fires, obviously, you've read about it and seen it in the news. There's been plenty of facilities that have had some issues. All batteries, no matter where you buy them, how you buy them, have some manufacturing defect in them. It is generally those defects that cause those kind of conditions that require propagation of fire and explosion. We're going to look at that explosion piece. When batteries start to fail, they off-gas. They produce hydrogen gas, carbon monoxide, and that's a precursor to them going bad, right? And if that gas builds up, it can explode if they're in a container. Toxic plume, again, if we do have a fire impact or an explosion impact, that is the smoke and the particulates that are coming off of these batteries and the heavy metals moving through our environment here in our community, and what causes us to do evacuations and shelter in place. And you've seen that recently in California. They had a chemical leak and they did those things. And then lastly, the environmental impact of anything we do. All that smoke, all the water we put on there to cool the fire, where is that going and how is it going to impact the environment here in Caroline? So again, to me, that is the most important piece of any of these facilities. When we look at utility scale batteries, and I know we're talking about solar, and solar would use a utility scale battery, so would REC, Dominion, those ones I showed you are all utility scale. The predominant technology that's out there is lithium ion phosphate. There are other technologies, all right? Where is it? The nickel, manganese, cobalt. That was a fire, that was the largest battery storage fire in the United States, called Moss Landing in California. They had that technology, and as you can see in those dots, red being severe, it had a severe fire risk, it had a severe explosive risk, a severe toxic plume, so on and so on. But all of these technologies may come into play if someone is putting battery storage at a solar facility. The top 2, the lithium ion and the flow battery or a redox battery, are the 2 probably the ones that you might see the most. The redox battery is important to understand. If you notice, it's green on fire, green on explosion, green on toxic plume. It uses 2 tanks and it pumps an electrolyte between those 2 tanks, and the ions are exchanged during that process. Vanadium is the heavy metal in that solution of sulfuric acid and water. So the issue for that is a leak, right? That is an environmental hazard versus other types. It doesn't have a fire hazard, doesn't have an explosion hazard, but it does have an environmental piece that can do that. So when we look at utility grade batteries, we need to first always look at the technology they're using, okay? And I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a minute. From our standpoint, across the board, I want to go over some of the codes that are in place today that govern energy storage. And who's going to enforce those at certain stages. So the Virginia Construction Code is the predominant code here in Virginia. It's adopted by the state. It's enforced by our local building officials. And it can reach out into other codes, the International Fire Code, the National Electric Code, the Virginia Fire Code, and all of the other mechanical codes that are out there. And that forms a foundation that is required of everybody, but there are chapters in there specific to battery storage. Right? And so that regulation of what they can do, what they can't do, will first come out of that area. In your ordinance, we asked you to write in NFPA 855. That's the National Fire Protection Standard for Energy Storage Systems. And that's really the best standard that's out there. Our current Virginia codes, our building codes, cannot get to NFPA 855. And so the reason we're writing in our ordinance is so that our building officials can enforce that section of the code. All right. As the Virginia code moves down through its code cycles, eventually they will pick that up probably in their next code cycle. But the code cycles can be 3 to 6 years apart depending on the standards. Okay. And I'm going to talk about 855 here on the next slide. 855 brings in some other slides, but it is predominantly focused on that battery storage. It looks at the chemistry of the battery first, and then it moves down into what the requirements are going to be for that type of chemistry. All right. We don't need to do explosive monitoring if we're using an electrolyte tank battery or redox flow battery, but we do if we're doing lithium. So, and then lastly is the Virginia Fire Code, and this is important to understand. The Virginia Fire Code is enforced by the building official on new construction, and then it's turned over to the fire marshal's office for periodic inspection. Ideally, the fire marshal will be the one going in businesses, going into a solar facility or a data center after it is opened, after the CO has been issued by the building official periodically, and making sure everything is in accordance with the codes that exist. Today, Caroline, we do not have a local fire marshal. Okay, we rely on the Commonwealth of Virginia to provide fire marshal services to us by default. All right, so down the road, if you want maintenance on these things, we need to look at hiring a fire marshal to do code enforcement post-CO. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions up to this point? Perfect, I'll keep rolling. As we get more data centers, as we get more commercial or industrial, I would recommend that. The problem today, and as a fire chief, I can't come to the board and say we need a fire marshal today. The code is only enforced in commercial businesses. Guess where we don't have a lot of fires? Commercial businesses, right? Most of our fires occur in 1 and 2 family dwellings. So I can't come to the board and say we got to have this because it's a problem. But down the line, if we want to make sure these facilities are keeping what they're supposed to be doing, everything is on, all the safety systems are on, that would be something we need to look at. Okay. As I talked about, this is kind of the gold standard 855, and I'll just give you the overview of it, not get into the details. The first part of the standard is a hazard mitigation analysis. This is required of the person coming in building the facility. They need to use a third party to provide us everything that could go wrong with their chemistry, with their type of battery, with their type of setup. That is the foundation of what we do next. From that hazard mitigation analysis, we can develop an emergency response plan. You told me what's wrong, tell me how we're going to address it. Who's going to be in charge, where the command center is going to be, all the way down to the training of our firefighters on that specific plan. Those are great things that have come along. They weren't here 5, 10 years ago. The third piece of that is, again, the hazard mitigation will point out, let's say lithium ion, that we need electric monitoring, or what's called a BMS, battery monitoring system. We need to monitor the gas coming off lithium ion to make sure that we're getting 2 sources of a thermal runaway. If the batteries start to degrade, we've got 2 means of testing whether they're going to go badly. If they're going to go badly and the gas system detects gas, we want to make sure it's tied to the venting and the product will be vented so we don't have an explosion risk. All of that comes from that hazard mitigation analysis and in the gas monitoring piece. And lastly, emergency systems. What systems are going to be required? Sprinklers, alarm system, ventilation, communication systems, all of that stem from that. So when we get an application, this should all be filled out as long as we're following this code and we have access to this code. So that's why that was written into this ordinance. Any questions about that? The reason this is important too is lithium ion is prevalent today. It may not be in the future, right? We might find something better and we need something that's going to change with the technologies, right? And we're still going through the same steps, but we're really looking at the threat, particularly what's going to go on with that. Any questions? Usually silence is not
Chief
good.
Loftus, what is the water source that'll be used for fire suppression should it occur?
You know, it's really going to depend where the facility is, right? And first and foremost, I'd love to say we have a municipal water system that covers the county. We don't. So in some areas of the county, we have to bring our own water, and we'd have to bring it through tankers.
Chief, yeah, I have a few questions. How will the stormwater management runoff be managed?
That's outside my purview. I don't do
Okay.
stormwater. But here's the thing. All of our firefighting water, I think Leon wrote in that ordinance, that needs to be captured, not just stormwater. If we have an event and we're spraying water on these batteries, all of that water coming off there is going to be contaminated, right? It needs to be captured and treated. Yeah.
So the state code does require that they conform with the DEQ requirements for stormwater and ENS. So they are treated just like any other facility as it relates to stormwater and ENS. But like Chief said, we added the additional provisions to capture water so that it doesn't get into the natural environment.
Thank you. With what we're proposing, should the battery facilities be required to have higher standards than what the 855 minimums are for the state? Is that something we can?
We can certainly write higher standards, right? So any code, right? I don't care what it is, this book or any other code book is the very minimum, right?
Mhm.
And you know that. Right now, given the breadth of what we're trying to do in the time frame, I think it's a good start. I think this ordinance will be modified over time to add those things that we find. We haven't had to deal with a battery storage facility yet, so we're learning from everybody else, and we put the best foot forward that you see before you today.
Okay. And I don't know if you can answer this question, excuse me, if you can answer this question, or this is for Mr. Hughes, but should the local fire departments receive developer-funded training as well as specialized firefighting equipment?
You know, really for these kind of, the training is going to be required out of 855. Okay, that's a given. As far as the specialized equipment, I don't think there's really anything that's out there specifically to fight battery fires. The issue in this county is manpower. It's not so much equipment. And if we have to bring our own water to a fire, we're going to have to split our forces, some just doing nothing but bringing water to the fire over a period of time, and others sitting there. So our issue here in the county is manpower, not so much equipment. I don't know how that gets addressed. You know, having a developer buy a fire truck would be a great idea, would save the county money. But at the same time, I got to have people to put on those trucks, and developers can't pay that cost, you know, forever. And that's that's the issue with that. So I wouldn't, you know, proffers, if they wanted to proffer a truck, we would take that without a doubt.
You mentioned manpower. Is there some way we could have a third-party organization that would have manpower to supply you in emergency situation that the developer would pay for?
I'm not sure we could get that on the front end. If we had a disaster at one of those facilities, that facility is on the hook for that, right? I would have to call mutual aid from Hanover, King George, or wherever it might be. Those agencies would come into the county to support us in the immediacy. But a lot of that is going to be pushed back onto the business. You're going to have to provide long-term support for this event. We cannot. So we can tackle an event for probably 24 hours, but that's about it, because we got to return back to doing our normal business. So at that point, you're bringing in EPA, you're bringing in other state agencies to deal with that, as well as the developer has to provide that. It's their facility. So.
Okay, one last question. I think one last question. Well, you mentioned the plume. Okay, so what environmental effects and residential effects would the plume cause?
Well, it depends, again, on your battery chemistry, what's coming off of there. It can cause a lot. You're talking about all the products of combustion from these heavy metals. They're moving over the land. They're titrating out. They're falling out. Depending on what's in there and the concentration will depend how much we evacuate or we shelter in place. But again, those materials are dropping out over the land. I can't predict what's going to do to livestock or crops. But
sure.
If we look again to Moss Landing in California, a lot of particulate dropped out of the clouds and is on the ground, and you know they're finding that through testing. So, you know, that's no different than a house fire, right? The house fire stuff's going to migrate, but we can put it out pretty quick.
Sure.
We just don't have the sustained time to put it out if it continues to burn, and letting it burn is not a great idea.
Okay. Is there any way that this can be encapsulated?
In theory, yes. In theory.
Theory?
in theory. Okay, I'll give you an example why I say I'm a little hesitant to say no. For electric vehicle fires, there is an encapsulation product you can get that goes over the vehicle. It's tough to use because as soon as you introduce air into it, it starts burning back again. It doesn't put it out, it's just smothering, right? We've looked at those, we've shied away from those from a response standpoint. Could you, in theory, cover the whole exterior battery container? It's possible. It's possible.
So there are no building materials, no building structure that this would be already built, encapsulated?
No.
Okay.
You know, what they're using is the container, the Connex box,
Sure,
the
the
Connex,
Connex. Sure.
and their products inside. So what we don't want to see is a building, right? A physical structure that you can come in and out of that is loaded with batteries.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we're looking at the outdoor storage, and that's it.
Thank you.
You mentioned that we are reliant on the state to provide a fire marshal for us for inspections. Is there a third-party independent fire marshal that you can hire, that can be hired on a random basis and at their cost to inspect them?
I don't think it can be done on a random basis. We could have a part-time fire marshal that we hire, absolutely, right? That comes in to do those things. Yeah.
What I don't want is them to be on a schedule and know when we're going to show up.
You know, the board would have to adopt the inspection schedule once a year, once every 6 months. When you show up is, you know. The other issue is out of 855, you get a use permit. This is important for inspections. You know, for them to continue, 855 requires a use permit issued by the fire marshal. And what that allows is the fire marshal to go on site to be able to do that inspection under that permit at any time, you know, in accordance with what's been adopted. Just like a building official, once there's an open permit, can come on and do the inspection. You can't say he's trespassing or any of those other things. You granted him permission by that permit.
So, I want to go back to the toxic plume again. So if there was a facility in Sparta that was approved, what kind of impact would that have on you, on the fire department to try to, if that incident should happen, what kind of, and I know that would be in your response plan, but would that be something tough to deal with in that part of the county?
Without a doubt. Okay. And the primary reason is we've got to bring our own water. And we got to bring a lot of water. And so there is no hydrant system down in the Sparta area. Downtown Sparta doesn't have hydrants. So bringing tankers in there, our tankers carry, you know, between 1,500 and 3,000 gallons, but they would have to continually circulate. Where to get water, you know, there is some dry hydrants in that area, but, you know, they're going to have to travel. It takes a lot of manpower. So the short answer is, yeah, that's gonna be much harder than other places in the county.
On the root cause analysis, so if that's, you know, in number 15, it talks about if there are other places in the county that, so that once they find the root cause, and let's say the same company has another site in the county, once that incident happens at the first site and they find out what the root cause was, what happens to the other locations that have the same type of equipment that might have had a default in it or whatever? What happens to those locations? Are they cease to operate until they fix the issue, or?
I don't think I have an answer for that. That really falls outside of what I can answer. The root cause analysis, we wanted to put that in the ordinance because a lot of times these facilities, when something happens, they want to say there's an NDA and you can't talk about what happened. And we think that root cause is important to push what happened out to the public. The public has a right to know, you know, what transpired. So what happens in other facilities as a result of that report, I can't answer. I would like to think that corrections would be made, but I don't know of a mechanism to force that to happen.
Okay, so I saw the battery site location, so I know there's going to be containment, or are they going to be in like a basin? So let's say a battery explodes and a chain reaction happens, and how do we know how are we going to ensure that we have enough containment So let's say if we had a terrible rainstorm, what would be what would happen there? You know,
Good.
if they're in a basin that, and I don't know what kind of containment would be needed to eliminate that.
We wouldn't want the container to be in a basin in the first place because rainwater would sit in there and the battery would get wet, right? So it's going to have to be on higher ground with containment on the sides,
Okay.
typically. Before we get to an explosion, there's other means. I didn't cover those, but there is some testing that we can do to make sure that those batteries will stay within that container, right? And that is required here for them to show us that testing. Is it possible they go beyond the container? Absolutely. But with all the safety systems in place today, I'm not sure we would see much of an explosion. It's always possible. But to answer your question, we wouldn't be in a basin. You know, and again, hopefully the separation distance contributes to each of the containers not getting on fire.
So on remote monitoring, so would that be an outside contractor? Will you guys have some stuff too where you could, would that have to be an outside entity for the remote monitoring?
I'm not sure I know who's going to be doing the remote monitoring. Leon, do you know where that came from?
Is that
Monitoring
did I
wells
read that?
remotely?
Somewhere?
So with the monitoring wells, they would have to be responsible for providing the test results of those wells.
Oh, just for the wells?
Yeah,
Okay.
for the monitoring wells, yes.
Okay.
Chief Loftus, you mentioned that we can support 1,500 to 3,000 gallons in the tankers and whatnot. How many gallons would it take to flood one of these containers to contain?
You know, I'd start at 5,000 and go up depending on the size of the container. I mean, I'm just looking at, you know, a 40-foot dumpster is a lot of water.
Okay.
I mean, a lot.
Is it possible for us to require them, kind of like the ball field has their own catchment system to, I guess, water their fields and things like that. But could we require them as part of our code to have a water catchment system that would provide some of that water for you?
Leon?
Yeah, the Code of Virginia gives the county some pretty significant leeway in terms of items that you can require under the battery storage section. Yes. So if you wanted to put in there something like that and have an amount, you could add that certainly.
But independent of the public water service, so that we're not draining away from, you know.
Yeah, yeah, like a tank. Yeah.
I had a question, Chief Loftus.
Yes, sir.
So if there is an event and a root cause analysis is done, who in the county actually reviews that? I mean, I know that it says in here, Board of Supervisors will have a copy of it, but I don't really see who reviews it.
Yeah, the county would get it. You know, I don't know who would, you know, the county would probably have to get a third party to help in assisting and reviewing that. And that would really come down to the board just because of the technical nature, I would assume.
Okay.
But I don't have an answer for that. But again, if the board has it, it's public information at that point.
You mentioned about NDAs. Is there a way for us to eliminate their ability to hide behind them?
Huh.
Step away from the dice on that one.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's not nice.
We, to the extent it's related to these impacts, yes, there's not a mechanism through a land use approval to get to confidential proprietary information that wouldn't be related to something like this. But I think providing something like this root cause analysis report, that would be a public document. There may be information provided that would otherwise have been held closer to the vest, but it couldn't be a requirement of the land use approval that you waive all NDAs or confidentiality with respect to their technology.
I have a question for Mr. Hughes. I know we don't have a full-time fire marshal for the county, but we do have systems where inspections are done, like in the schools and the preschools and such. We don't have any way of monitoring to go in and check every so often to see if they're,
The answer to that is no. Once the certificate of occupancy is issued, that it goes away from the building official. You'll have to have a fire code adopted. When you're talking about daycares, you're talking about schools, that is the realm of the state fire marshal. That is who's doing those. Yes, ma'am.
yeah, but I know we have had county officials in the, preschools sometimes, just reminding people that, that their fire extinguisher is outdated or something I mean, it might have just been a friendly reminder, but
Yeah, I know we have done talks for the schools to remind the teachers, what to do. Don't
Okay.
use extension cords, don't put all the stuff on the walls they love to do, especially in elementary school. But again, it's not our purview right now to do the inspections.
so what would we have to do to have some type of regular inspection outside of hiring a full-time fire marshal?
I think you could get away with a part-time, but the board would have to adopt an ordinance accepting the responsibility to do inspections in commercial occupancies here in Caroline. Because right now, they have not, and the state's responsible for that. So short of that, I don't know of another mechanism we can do inspections, because you'd have to do it under a code. You'd have to measure.
Okay,
what you're-
even the state would have to do it under a code?
The state does it under the uniform state fire code. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep.
Will it be done, or can we request it, or? It falls back on
It's really a state.
us, correct?
It's a state entity. They're responsible for doing it. Will it get done? I don't have an answer for that.
Okay,
If we want to, as a community, to make sure it gets done, then
something we can look at down
that's
the
something you
road.
can look at. Yep. You don't have to make that decision tonight
Yeah,
because they're not building tomorrow. But again, it's something to look at.
but maybe when more tax money becomes available,
Yes, ma'am.
as businesses grow over on 95 corridor. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hughes, while you're standing up there, I have a couple questions that maybe you can answer.
Sure.
Who pays for the facilities if they're abandoned?
So there's a section here for decommissioning,
Mhm.
and the responsibility is the owner applicant.
Sure.
Uh,
And if they just abandon, walk away,
So we can require a surety that would, hopefully would cover the cost and I think we built in with the escalation clause so that, to rise with inflation.
Good.
Typically those inflation factors are based on the CPI,
Mhm.
looked at annually, typically January of each year, based on the prior year's inflation rate. Those sureties are to increase by that amount. And so, as you may know, the CPI can rise and fall, but we also, have language that does not allow it to
Fall.
decrease. It
Correct.
can only increase. So,
those were my next two questions, was surety bond. Now, you mentioned, you kind of danced around that. Will that be in place?
yeah, of course. I mean, we don't, just like any other development, all of our projects, there's a surety that is required. So
Right.
this would not be any different than
Okay.
any other development.
Okay. And what guarantees can we have that the taxpayers will not have to bear the cost of cleanup?
So if you look in the ordinance, there's specific language that says that the applicant is required for remediation and cleanup and all costs associated with it.
Yes, I saw that. But again, if they abandon the site,
Then that's where your surety would step in.
okay. All right. Have we considered any annual revenue sharing payments?
So at this point, that is something that you would talk to an individual applicant about. The code does allow the county to enter into agreements, siting agreements as they're called. And so that is an issue that will be discussed with each individual applicant.
Mhm.
So I can't sit here and tell you today that that's, going to happen. But there is a mechanism through the Code of Virginia that would allow something like that to occur.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. Can the land that's been disturbed, is it, what's the, can it be restored back to agricultural use?
So part of the decommissioning language is that the land has to be restored to pre-development conditions.
Yes, sir. Just wanted to make sure that was on public file. Thank you.
Sure.
My question is for Chief Loftus again.
Yes, ma'am.
So could you go over a possible scenario? You gave the two photos of different facilities. So say if one of those units in the middle, in the center, caught on fire. Now you can't go inside the gate, right? You're going to be fighting the fire from outside.
No, we can go inside the gate. I mean, here's a facility here, right? We can go inside there.
But you're not going to bring the equipment in there, just hoses.
Well, again, we're hoping that we can tie into the standpipe
Standpipe.
system and pump water into that without laying anything on the ground,
Okay.
right? At the end of the day, we want to deluge or flood that battery unit.
But you're
with
not,
water.
it was my understanding that you didn't douse the battery that was on fire. You doused the ones adjacent to it so it doesn't catch.
Well, that is a theory, right? In theory, you want to cool the stuff around it, but I don't want the battery that's producing the heat. If I can put water on that and keep that from producing smoke and vapor and all of that, that's going to be my first choice. So absolutely, I'm going to try to put the water on what's burning.
That's not going to make it explode even more or release more toxic fumes?
No. Only if you were using salt water would you have an issue, but we're not.
Okay.
Now,
So,
so to your point, we do that sometimes if a house is on fire, right? And we may cool the house next door so it doesn't catch by putting water on it. But these are already metal containers, right? So at the end of the day, if I can put the house fire out quickly, then I don't need to cool the neighbor's yard or the neighbor's house. Same thing here. If I can deluge the first container and keep the heat to a minimum, I don't have to worry about it propagating. This scenario is great. Whatever I do in this scenario, I got to worry about it propagating to the next container.
right.
Okay. So again, putting that water on that fire is going to be our first and foremost approach.
Well, how much water do you expect to be pumping? Like, is there like a rate per minute or hour? And
If you're looking at something like this size container, you're probably looking upwards of, 20,000 gallons to start. And you're going to be there a while.
how many tankers do we have?
We have 5.
And then how many days do you expect these fires to last, that you'll be manning them?
I really can't give you an estimate on that. For this type of container, it's going to go out sooner than if it was an inside and things started to propagate. So I don't really have a time frame. But I'd say 24 hours we'll be there to monitor it, keep it cool.
Okay. That's all?
I'm just using that as a start.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
Mr. Chair, any other questions?
Anybody else? Questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Loftus.
So, Mr. Chair, I would just say the question is related to the decommissioning and that process. If you look in section 1 of the solar ordinance, the decommissioning information is there. It talks about the surety, it talks about the timelines that they'd be required, it talks about restoring the property to prior conditions. So that information is in section 1 under the decommissioning section. So what I said was the information related to decommissioning is in section 1 of section 23 under the solar portion. So it outlines the decommissioning process, it outlines the surety process, and it outlines the items that you talked about, returning the property to its pre-development condition.
Excuse me, Mr. Hughes. When will we have an opportunity to go through the ordinance? So say, for example, if I wanted to add language in it, if I wanted to include like material safety data sheets that were required,
Mhm.
when would we have an opportunity to add those things in? After the
So-
public hearing or now or?
So what I would say, if you have recommendations that you'd like to make right now, do so. If the commission disposes of this item tonight, moves it on between now and, you know, next Tuesday, certainly provide us additional information, because we're going to continue to look at this. I mean, we have done probably 6 months worth of work in a matter of weeks.
Right.
And so, do I think this is a perfect document? I do not. I would not stand here and tell you I think it's a perfect document. Do I think it's a document that is in its ultimate final form? It is not. I mean, just sitting here a few minutes ago, I found a lettering issue. So, I mean, I would say between now and Tuesday, if you have additional items, forward that on so we can forward that to the board.
Okay, I mean, there's not even page numbers, but, so is that what you would like me to do, is just forward everything to you? And how will I know that the commission agrees to it before we pass it on to the board?
Well,
I've got a lot of things.
so I would say this, anything you have, forward it to us and we will move it forward. The ultimate decision about whether it stays in the ordinance is going to be up to the board. So your recommendation can include whatever you'd like it to include, as well as even after disposition of the item, you know, we will say, hey, the commission recommended ... and it will show up in the document. So if the board chooses to adopt that, then it adopts it. If they choose to pull it out, then they would do that as well. But anything you give us will get forwarded, so.
What was the last thing you said?
I said, anything you give us will be forwarded for the board's consideration.
Okay. I mean, I'm new to all this, so I had everything all prepared. I thought we were going to go through it line by line, and I mean,
If you have, we are here as long as you want to be here to go to this. If you want to, if you
Okay.
have specific items, please ask those questions.
okay. I mean, do you want to start at the beginning now, or do you want to have other things to talk about?
I think procedurally, Mr. Chair, it might be easier to open the floor, have the public comment. That might help inform the planning commission's deliberations. Once the public comment is over, there's still opportunity for the planning commission to discuss the language. And then you all can, you know, discuss amongst yourselves whether it gets recommended with certain additions that anybody might have recommended. And, you know, please, everyone provide your additional individual comments to the board members. That would, you know, be the appropriate time, I think, or the best time to talk through what those recommendations look like.
Mr. Hughes, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Remind us again, I mean, I know that the General Assembly of Virginia required us to do this just within the last few weeks. And when do they want it due? July?
Well, it's not that they want it to. There's a provision in the ordinance that in the code that says if you don't have that, battery storage or energy storage facilities will be regulated based on ordinances that are in place on July 1. So if you don't have anything in place on July 1, then they're not regulated against that. And, you know, that is not our doing. That is the fact that these laws were signed in April, and we have scrambled to try to get something in place.
So 8 weeks they gave us to try to do 6 months worth of work.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Okay, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and open up the floor. And if there's anybody wishing to speak, could you please move forward and address your name and the jurisdiction?
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Carrie Clark. I'm in the Madison District. In the Mojave Desert in California, by the way, I just found out about this afternoon, just started looking at this evening. And I have a lot of questions. And first of all, I want to say that I am tired of having this kind of stuff shoved down my throat as a taxpayer. I think that we should make it as difficult as possible for anyone to build this kind of a facility in Caroline County. Because if we do that, that will discourage them and maybe they'll go elsewhere. In the Mojave Desert in California, there is an enormous solar farm. It's abandoned. It wasn't cost effective. And you can imagine in the Mojave Desert, that'd probably be an ideal place to build something like this because there's a lot of sunny days, and that's what solar depends on, sunny days. It's abandoned. The people went bankrupt. It's an eyesore. It doesn't allow proper development of the natural vegetation growing there. It's a mess. And that's what we could end up with. So I think that if the company, for example, goes bankrupt, which it could easily do, when you look at the risk versus the reward for this kind of a facility, it looks pretty dangerous to me, especially if there is an event. They're an eyesore. I see in here that they can be 25 feet high, and there can also be a variance. 25 feet is pretty high. It's higher than most trees in Caroline County. It also requires raping the land and taking out a bunch of trees to put in these eyesore facilities. 150 to 200 feet from residences? That's mighty close. I don't want that. I don't want something more than 1,000 feet from me, if that. 4,000 gallons it took to put out a fire on one Tesla car on I-95. 4,000 gallons. That's as much as my household uses in 3 to 4 months. The risk just isn't worth it. If you have to balance the risk versus the reward, it isn't worth it. It also takes land out of agricultural use. So I suggest again that we make it more difficult and onerous for someone to build something like this in Caroline County. Should require the facility to store a minimum of 20,000 gallons of water at all times. Require them to post a $1 million minimum bond against any kind of a disaster, because it would cost us a lot of money to fix it. And I don't want to pay for that. Please say no. Make it difficult. Make the buffers as wide as we possibly can. Reduce the height of these things to maybe 10 feet and no variance over that. Let's please keep Caroline County, well, keep some sense. The data centers are bad enough, and this would be even worse. I don't think the risk is worth it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark.
Just, Mr. Chair, quickly before the next speakers come up, I do want to clarify to Commissioner Horton's point. Much of this that's in the proposed ordinance is mandated by the statute that will be effective July 1. So I just wanted to clarify for folks that the 25-foot minimum height is a mandate, or sorry, not minimum, but the 25-foot height limit is a mandate of the statute, and the setbacks are a mandate of the statute.
So you're saying that some of what's in the ordinance is a General Assembly is telling us we have to do certain things.
Correct. There is no option on those items.
Thank you.
Correct. Yes, that's correct. Those are the standards for any application.
Thank you, Mr. Hellhaven. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Please step forward. State your name and your voting district, please.
Good evening. My name is Rick Hanley, and I live in the Bowling Green District. And I want to thank the lady here in the Planning Commission, newly appointed, but you have asked some pertinent questions. I appreciate the fact that you've asked the questions that you've asked and raised the concerns that you've raised, because what I feel like this is being is it's being another situation where we're being given something that's kind of forced and kind of shoved down our throat, and we're asked to vote, and we're asked to make decisions and bring our legal team and all this and talk this psychobabble and all this legal jargon and all this nonsense, but yet we're being asked to make a decision pretty much in a hurry without taking our time and being deliberate, asking the right questions, and being very thoughtful about this process. Because the decisions that we make, they're going to be long-term, and they're going to have long-term ramifications in our community. Now, I live in Bowling Green, in town of Bowling Green, that's really not going to be affected by this. However, I do have connections in the Sparta area and other rural areas in this county. And I appreciate also the fire official talking about the potable water, the water issue, because again, you're gonna talk about these battery storage facilities that's going to require huge amounts of water to be able to put out, and then we're talking about maybe hopefully 24 hours. I mean, I don't know. This thing just sounds to me like it's being something that's being forced and putting pressure on us to make decisions. And I said this decision process has to be deliberate, thoughtful questions need to be asked, and at the end, I would ask and urgently implore this board to vote no on this, because we don't need to make Caroline County Spotsylvania. We don't need to make Caroline County Loudoun County. There's a reason why people like myself have moved to this area, because I value the rural area. I treasure being in a rural area and having the convenience of being in a part of the community that I live in. I don't want to see this become Fairfax. I lived in Fairfax County. I know what Fairfax County is like. I don't want to see this county become an abomination when it comes to these things, such as data centers and so forth, like Spotsy, Loudoun County, and all these other counties are doing, all in the name of so-called tax savings and all these other things. And so I just encourage us zoning commissions to vote no on this, to ask the right questions, to be thoughtful and deliberate in the decision-making process, and consider all the effects. We're talking habitat loss, fragmentation, soil water damage, toxic leaching, availability of water in case of a fire, and also issues regarding land restoration. It all sounds promising from these officials, but a lot of times the companies go belly up, and a lot of times the end is not better than the beginning. So thank you for your time. I urge you to vote no on this and on any other matter, and let's keep Caroline County beautiful and rural. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Please step forward and state your name and your voting district, please.
How you guys doing tonight? My name is Damon Gray, Bowling Green District. A couple things with this. First and foremost, I'm born and raised here. Lee, your mom taught me in school, you know what I mean? Know a lot of people in this community. Proud of my community and what we've always stood for. You know, you've got people with big money, big pockets that want to come in here and try to sway and like you said, rush things through. Warrior's Heart was declined when it first came to this community. A treatment center for veterans, first responders, all of that, kicked down the road, right? For us to do more of a study on them and what they're gonna do for our nation's heroes, the men and women that serve, do all of that stuff here. We kicked it down the road, right? Till we could do more research on them. Kicked it 6 months additional till they could open the doors and allow our heroes to come home, right? Well, we're allowing a data center to come into our community, offer proffers or bribes, essentially, not going to give us the training, not going to give us anything other than a suit and tie when it's convenient for them, and then they're going to leave us with the shit to pick up, right? For our farms, for our families, they don't have families that live here. They're not from, they don't care anything other than the dollar that they're going to make, and that's it. And I just encourage all of y'all to say, no, at least defer it down the road to where you at least have time for each of you to do the background work and the footwork that it should take for something like this to go through our county. You know, with people getting emails from, you know, representatives of, you know, REC and, you know, this center. What is it? You know, those emails, we see what they want us to see. We don't see all those other emails that they've got going back and forth, all these other phone conversations, these lunch dates, all this other crap. Y'all need to look into it, kick it down the road, defer it, right? What's it going to give you to study more for this? when it's talking about the future of our community, of our county. So that's what I say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Is there anybody else wishing to speak?
Good evening, Commissioners. Kevin Collins, Reedy Church District. I thank Mary for bringing our attention to the email. Did a quick Google search while I was in the audience and found out that the individuals that emailed our Director of Planning are none other than the Director of Government Affairs for REC, the CEO of REC, and their lawyer, Charlie Payne. Why are they getting a say in our county ordinance? They're not residents. They don't live here. But lo and behold, Public Utilities Transmission Distribution made it into the RP, and that's one of the things that they had requested. Now I'll continue with my prepared statement. My name is Kev. Oh, already got that part.
Yep, thank you, Kevin.
Urge you to think carefully before approving this ordinance that will allow industrial solar facilities and battery storage systems, or better known as BESS facilities, to expand across Caroline County. Most importantly, I ask that any ordinance you adopt be written first and foremost to protect the people of Caroline County, not to satisfy the business plans of outside solar developers. The purpose of local government is to safeguard the health, safety, welfare, and property rights of its citizens. It is not to make it easier for corporations to industrialize our landscape. First, we need to be honest about economics. These projects are often promoted as revenue generators, but in reality, it is more complicated. Industrial solar facilities require very few permanent employees once construction is complete. At the same time, they can remove productive farmland from agricultural use for decades, reducing economic activity that has sustained Caroline County for generations. The tax revenue promised today must be weighed against the long-term cost of lost agricultural production, impacts on neighboring property owners, road maintenance, emergency preparedness, and future decommissioning obligations. Second, the county has limited water resources. Large-scale solar developments can cover hundreds or thousands of acres, altering natural drainage patterns, affecting groundwater recharge. More importantly, battery storage facilities present a unique challenge when emergencies occur. Chief Loftus has told us battery fires can require enormous amounts of water, specialized equipment, and extended monitoring periods. Our county already faces challenges with water infrastructure. We should ask whether we have the resources necessary to respond to major industrial battery incidents. Third, Caroline's fire and rescue system was designed to protect a rural county, not to respond to large-scale lithium battery disasters. These fires can reignite days, even weeks later due to thermal runaway, requiring continuous monitoring and specialized response capabilities. Before allowing these facilities, we must honestly ask whether our volunteer and career firefighters have the personnel, training, equipment, water supply, and financial resources to handle such an event. We do not have to speculate about these details and these risks. In January 2025, one of the world's largest battery facilities at Moss Landing, California, caught fire, triggering evacuations of more than 1,200 residents, road closures, hazardous smoke concerns, and a major emergency response. The EPA later described the cleanup as the largest lithium-ion battery disaster in the agency's history. Just a couple more seconds here. As you consider these ordinance changes, I urge you to keep the focus on protecting the residents of Caroline. The first question should be, what protections do the residents need? I ask you to add more restrictions prior to this being implemented at July 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Is anybody else wishing to speak? Come on down. And your name and voting district, please.
Hi, it's Vicki Ross, Madison, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Mine's really more of a question and a clarification. I think it was Mr. Loftus who spoke to this. My question was the NFPA 855, and what I thought I understood him to say is that that code does not exist in Caroline County now as a requirement or a protocol. And what I also understood is an order, if we did have a fire marshal, even an ad hoc fire marshal, if you will, that we couldn't enforce that code because we don't even have that code in our statutes, the Caroline County statutes, which is the safety fire code. Did I understand that correctly? And could we make that a part of this? as far as the application process.
Chief Loftus.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're close.
Okay.
Okay, so it is not part of the Commonwealth of Virginia's code, 855. So the building official can't get to it on new construction. By putting it in the ordinance, the building official can enforce it on new construction. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Just because the Commonwealth codes are too many years behind, they just haven't picked that up. So when the Commonwealth picks up a new set of codes, right now we're using the 2021 code, it's 2026. When the new code cycle comes out, we expect that to be picked up. That's why we're adding it now, so it can be enforced.
Thank you. That was my question, and I just want to ditto what my friend Carrie Clark, Kevin Collins, and Mr. Gray said. I agree. Thank you. Please give it lots of consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Is there anybody else wishing to speak? And one more time, anybody else wishing to speak? Thank you. Public hearing is closed. Mr. Hughes?
Sir?
Would you like to add anything?
No, the only thing I would add is that, the reason that we are here adopting or asking that these ordinances be adopted is because, in the timeline, is because of the General Assembly. The county did not create the July 1 implementation in the state code. The citizens are correct. That is being forced upon us. But absent of adopting anything, then we are purely at the whims of if, and I say if a project was to be approved, you'd be purely at the whims of the development community. So, and as I stated earlier, do I think this is a perfect document? I do not. Do I think there needs to be amendments in the future? I do. My professional opinion is I'd rather have something on the books that we could have some protections on July 1 rather than have July 1 roll around and we be in a position not having any. And you could be a conspiracy theorist and say that it was designed that way because there are going to be a number of jurisdictions who probably aren't going to have anything in place. And I think that's probably a much worse position to be in than to have something that is not perfect. I would say in this instance, let's not perfect be the enemy of good.
The public hearing's closed.
Sorry, Ms. Clark, the public hearing.
I just wanted to ask if there's a way we could petition for some kind of extension to give us some more time to develop a robust policy.
That would be our lawyer could answer that.
I can clarify that there is not a mechanism for petition for additional time on adoption of an ordinance. The enactment clause for the mandatory energy storage as accessory to solar says, as Leon mentioned, any applications after July 1 will be treated based on the ordinance in effect as of July 1 until 2030. So this is until July 1 is the opportunity to adopt an ordinance.
It sounds like what you're saying, we could adopt something and then at least we'd have something in place and then we can go back and make changes later. But we would be at the mercy of the state if we don't have something in place by July 1.
That is correct.
Can I ask you a couple of other questions while you're up here?
Sure.
With the permission of the chair? What would happen, one of the things brought up is if a company goes bankrupt, so our option would probably be we'd have to file suit against that company. Maybe our lawyer may know the answer. Or...
So part of the ordinance is that there is a decommissioning requirement. And so they have to have a decommissioning plan. So if someone shows up and says, hey, I want to do a solar facility in Caroline County, part of that process is they have to have a decommissioning plan. As a part of that
Yeah.
decommissioning plan, there's a surety that would be posted if, that would be in place if.
Oh, so they
company-
will post, okay. All right. And when we went through this process in the past, it was the provisions for cutting down a minimum of trees, I believe, and also hiding trees around it. I
Screen.
can't remember what it said in all the articles. I did read through them. So what is it going to look like?
So now the state has prescribed what the screening requirements and setback requirements can be.
Okay, I know they did the setback, and what did they require on the screening?
Oh, I don't know. Let's take-
It's such a long document. I can't remember sometimes what the state is making us do and what we're
Sure.
trying to,
As
do ourselves.
correct. As Mr. Hughes mentioned, the intent was to retain as much of the existing policy that existed in the prior solar ordinance while accommodating what the statute now requires. The statute, so mitigating the visual impact on adjacent properties is still within the ordinance. That is the sort of broader requirement. The state mandates that any screening, the buffers can only be 50 feet of vegetative screening, I believe, and
So we can still have our vegetative screening.
there is still some amount of screening, and the plantings can't be required to be more than 3 feet at the time of planting.
Okay, all right.
So Ms. Horton, let me explain to you how that would look in the real world in development of a solar facility. So their construction process is to go in and clear cut as much as possible. They'd retain that 50-foot strip, but everything else would be essentially taken off the property and stripped down to the soil. And so the 50-foot buffer would be, the natural buffer would be left. If we had to supplement, where the state code hamstrings us is that we can't require that it be any more than 3 feet at planting. So the goal is to retain as much natural vegetative buffer as possible.
I remember in the past, when we did this, what happened is the solar companies would come in and rent farmland, and then we had buffers around it. And lots of times it was a 50-year lease, and we were required after that time to be returned back to natural. So we're still kind of allowed to, it's a leasing situation, correct?
It could be a lease, it could be a purchase.
Or sometimes they
Yeah.
do purchase.
Yeah.
And we'll be evaluating each one on an
Each one on
individual.
the individual merits, that is correct.
Two things I'd like to see, commissioners, if we do act on this, because something I know has to be done tonight. I mean,
We have to act on it.
we can't, we've got to say yes or no action, but it's going to move forward regardless. It sounds like we can require water tank to be on the property for fire, certain size water tank.
Sorry to jump in, Leon. Under the current statutory authority, there is a lot of latitude in anything dealing with the battery energy storage or the energy storage facilities. So specific to the regulations on those uses, yes, there's a lot of room for policymaking.
Yeah.
Chief
I would like to
Loftus-
require more fire safety, whatever we can put in. I mean, our hands are tied on a lot of this, but whatever we can do for fire safety at the moment.
Do we have an idea, Chief, of what the failure rate is on a per unit basis? Do 1 in 5 fail? Do 1 in 10 fail?
We do not. We do
Okay.
not.
In your opinion, if we were to require a 20,000 gallon water system, how many would you think would be ideal per number of units to contain?
That's a tough question off the top of my head. 10, I'm just using
So-
round numbers.
One 20,000 gallon tank per 10 units.
Yeah, and we may have to relook at that. That may be extreme. Yeah,
Is like, as in, that's too few units or too many units?
too few units. You
Okay.
probably could go more. Having a 20,000 gallon water tank at a site, depending on the size of the site, right? I just don't have that expertise to determine what that is. That's really an engineering thing. Would greatly help us, without a doubt.
Okay.
Especially in the rural community, depending where it's put. But even if it's near, a municipal water system, having their own water on site, like right now, we're in a drought, right? We've got water conditions, restrictions on our municipal water system. It would not pull away in the first, immediacy of that fire from what the consumers here are using.
Mr. Hughes, could we write in that if Chief Loftus were to need additional water resources for a neighboring fire, that they'd be able to pull away for some of those if they had multiple storage tanks? Okay.
Certainly, we'll have to wordsmith it, but certainly do that.
Okay. So what I would like to see ideally would be one tank per 5 would be ideal for me. And then if the county were to need resources to combat a local fire near, it would effectively serve as a dry hydrant, at least for, if they have 3 or 4 tanks, be able to pull 25% of the resources away from that.
And how would they fill also? How do they fill?
Anything that doesn't pull away from our resources would be their
Yeah.
problem.
I mean, I don't know if they would be digging their own wells or if they would catch rainwater or.
I wouldn't allow them to dig wells at all. It would have to be some sort of
I
catchment.
would just like to see, I mean, since we're required to allow something, the state is making us do this. I would like to see more fire safety.
Mr. Tignor, we will certainly look at that. The concern that initially pops in my head is how do we enforce that? That's the one thing that as we create conditions, we want them to be enforceable so that we can actually have some, can go after the applicant or whatever. But I understand your goal.
I think what I'm hearing is that there be a performance standard built into that section 2 of part 2 of section 23 dealing with energy storage that says as part of the development there would be X amount of water storage per X amount of battery energy storage.
Yeah, and I
Just
used
figuring out what that balance is.
I used the 20,000 gallons based on what Chief Loftus said it would take to handle a single unit over a 24-hour period. And that's why I was asking about failure rates, because if it was 20%, 1 in 5, but without knowing that, I would rather skew to the slightly more extreme on having excess water, because I don't think that would be a problem for you.
Okay.
Well, how do we regulate where the water comes from? Are they going to be allowed to dig wells? Is it going to come from
Yeah,
the
that's what
county?
I was just saying, yeah.
So I don't think they should be allowed to dig wells or pull from local rivers or things along those lines. I mean, the farmers can pull from the rivers for irrigation purposes and whatnot. That would have to be a bit of a problem for the whatever company builds it, as long as it doesn't pull from Caroline County's resources. How and where they buy their water from to bring it in, frankly, becomes their problem,
Yeah, they could purchase water. That's a good point.
and tank it in.
So as a part of that, we could include some language that would prevent the digging of wells or ground.
I would also expand that to not being able to draw from any creeks, rivers, ponds, anything along those lines either.
Yeah, I don't think state would let them do that. But I don't know, I mean, our lawyer might know. Would we be allowed to limit what they can tap into from our public wells? I mean, can we restrict that?
I do think similar to how the county has approached the the use of water for industrial cooling, a similar structure could be used for this type of mandatory storage capacity.
Okay.
And Mr. Hughes, would that because I like the water thing, so could that be enforced prior to occupancy?
Oh, yeah, certainly. It would
Okay,
be.
so
it
that would be
a condi-
written
yes.
that would
Yes.
be available before they could occupy.
It would be a development condition, and they would have to have it as a part of their site plan process, and then before they got a CO, they'd have to comply with all. Yes. So the provisions in section 2 of the article are designed to be upfront. The majority of them are designed to be upfront items. There are some that are back end, but the majority are development requirements.
Cause there was some conversation, and I mean, I respect the public for their comments, so, I mean, some of them had some brought good stuff to the table, but I said he had left now, so, but I know we don't have a dollar, I know you said we have incorporated where but it's not a dollar amount. So I think, I know, did I read, cause I've been reading so much stuff, I don't know if I read it in here. So the county would reevaluate the cost of decommissioning. So, and I don't know if I read it here or something else I read. So they would look at that like every 5 years to see if the cost of it is that. Did I read that in here or somewhere else?
I think on page 8, it was section 23.4, section 6, talks about a bond that requires 110% of the value regarding the decommission on the surety bond.
Okay.
And I would also, you might say.
I can clarify that the 5-year requirement is what comes from the new legislation dealing with solar energy, and that also addresses decommissioning for solar energy and says they have to provide a renewal for every 5 years. The county still would be allowed to account for inflation in between those 5-year renewals. But that 5-year period is based on the statutory language.
Okay. So I don't know, are the majority of the solar facilities, are they owned by one entity, or do we have lease? Are there a situation where we have property that is leased? Because in this verbiage here states that if they can't get the land back to the condition that it was prior to development, if the owner and the county are okay with it, then all is good, if that's where I read it. I think it's,
Where specifically speaking?
where did I see that at?
I can probably jump in real quick because that is also related to the new statutory language. And so there is an accommodation, there's an allowance for the property to not go back to its pre-development condition.
So would it be condemned?
It would be, no, it wouldn't be condemned. It would have to be consistent with another plan of development, let's say that was turned in. So theoretically, the land is no longer being used for solar. It is going to be, that is being decommissioned, but it's going to be repurposed for a non-agricultural use that's consistent with the county's zoning. The land wouldn't need to be returned to agriculture and then developed. It would allow for a plan of development to follow the decommissioning of the solar facility. But that again is specifically from the statute that says owners, there needs to be an accommodation for there to be not returned to pre-development condition, if everybody agrees to that.
And I guess my last question is, so the leaseor has no, so if it was property that was leased, the leaseor wouldn't have any obligation to the county. It would only be the owner.
That's, I think.
I'm having back problems too, so maybe it's just, yeah. Typically in a decommissioning agreement, that would be required. All of those interested parties are signatories. So the property owner, the lessor, and then that agreement is backed up by the surety for that 100% of the estimated cost based on the engineer's estimate. So the owner and the lessor or the developer are usually both acknowledging that agreement.
So the leasee goes bankrupt, the leaseor, they left holding the bag to pay us. Is that correct?
Or the insurance, the surety company.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Anybody else have questions?
Okay, so why don't we start at the beginning of the document? So the first thing I would like to change is the purpose and intent, because it looks like it's being promoting economic development. So my suggestion is the purpose and intent of the solar energy regulation is to regulate solar energy development so that the public health, safety, and general welfare of county citizens and businesses protected. Solar energy development, construction, installation, and operation shall not negatively impact agricultural and forested lands, endangered species, habitats, conservation lands, scenic views, cultural resources, and other environmentally sensitive lands. These regulations provide land use standards for the underlying zoning district with safeguards to ensure the proper development of facilities that generate electricity by means of solar power. So is this something that I can send to you, Mr. Hughes, to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I was going to ask you to send that, not dictate that. So.
I have another question. In the document that I received in the packet, it had there was a regulation that products should not exceed 600 megawatt AC. I think it was taken out of the new document because there's nothing in the law that states, gives a quantity.
Yep.
I mean, I was going to suggest that we put in 50 megawatts as a cap. Can we still do that? Put a cap on how much solar?
I would say that's an unknown, the scope of authority is untested as of July 1 on either an acreage or megawatt cap for solar development in any jurisdiction. So if that was part of this commission's recommendation, then it would proceed with that cap, and whether or not it's enforceable, we would just
Well, they dictated to us everything. I mean, like the other lady said, 25-foot height. That's ridiculous. Our old ordinance was 15 foot. I mean, so,
Yeah.
I mean, I think we should be able to put some limits of our own. So
So
I'm going to ask if we can either put a cap of 50 megawatts or.
So what would, I don't know if the chief, what would a 50 megawatt facility look like? You don't know?
Well, I can tell you. It's like, yeah. So typically it's like 4 to 7 acres per megawatt. 4 to 7, not 47.
4 to 7.
Yeah,
4
between
to-
4 and 7 acres.
If, I don't have anything against putting on a cap. I think we had a cap before, but then I think we had companies coming in and saying, well, I'm gonna put one here, and then I'm gonna put one right beside it, and then, so then they end up, actually it benefits them. I think it's a good suggestion, but I don't want it, we lose tax revenue, the smaller it is. When they just do a bunch of small ones, we didn't have the same tax revenue as if it was just one big one.
Yeah.
Because that's how they get around the cap.
You
They
would
just
see
put small
multiple.
ones side by side.
multiple applications.
I mean,
it
yeah,
seems.
we have one of those going up in Ladysmith area, two small ones side by side, correct?
There
Are
was,
they
there
still
was,
going
there
up?
was a project that had 2 facilities approved, but that's not gonna happen now.
Okay, so that one's not gonna happen. But that's what they were doing.
The other thing I would say relative to the cap is we are going to put language in the proposed comp plan amendments that would place a cap countywide. So the county would have, and you all to be the ultimate decider on what that percentage is, but X percentage of the county would be for solar facilities. So that's where those items that came out of the original document end up in the comp plan document as policy guidance. So that when you can use that in evaluating applications. I'm not saying not to do what you're saying. I'm just saying, in addition to what you're saying is, the comp plan is a document that can also have proposed countywide caps as well.
Yeah, but we're creating a solar ordinance now, so we can make our guidelines.
No, I understand. And the comp plan document is ultimately used as it's the guiding document so that these facilities make application, they have to be in conformance with the comprehensive plan. So let's say you reached your cap of, let's say 1% of the county, and I'm just throwing it out there, I don't know about to say I percent 1%, but that's the number, it says 1%. And let's say we got to that 1% and an application came along and that was guidance in the comp plan, that's guidance you could use in evaluating an application that may push that number to 2%. So your policy document says we want 1%, an application says it's going to push it to 2%, that could be a potential reason to deny an application or not support an application. They work in concert. They work together.
Now, do we need to add in like in their submission requirements, equipment laid down in storage yards, need to be identified?
Certainly.
Okay. Material safety data sheets required for all the solar panels. A letter confirming that no PFAs are contained in the panels, equipment, or inverters. Can we require that? I think we should also add emergency lighting that needs to be on-site and mobile. And also ask them to require how much water or chemical will be required and where it will come from, and a list of the chemicals used and the frequency of cleaning the panels. And under security lighting, we need to add in accordance with dark sky requirements. I don't know if we have that in our,
That's already in our ordinance.
okay. And I don't know, with the commission's permission, I had submitted a letter back when I was before I was on the planning commission. And I had a sample ordinance from Patrick County that was it was adopted in March of this year. But on page 49 and 50, I would like to add this to the design and development standards. It's their article 6.5.1 through 6.5.4. Obligation to remove damaged or dislodged components in event of a severe weather event, notification of cleanup plan submission, third-party environmental contractor requirement, site status and continued operations. If we could take that, I don't know, I could send it to you, and if we could add that in.
No, I have that, and I have those sections 6.5.1 and .4.
6.5.1 to 6.5.4. Thank you. Also, Under the noise study, Mr. Hughes, it should be in the solar ordinance as well as the batteries. So there's a problem with with solar and the inverters. Sometimes they can be heard like from 2 miles away. And the battery units are also, so I don't know if you have what section of the new ordinance, the new version, the noise limitations, but can we perform a noise study at the property boundary prior to and post-construction? As well as in at certain radiuses to the project? And then put limits on how many decibels?
Certainly.
Who would do the noise study?
The applicant.
I don't know, does the county do that or do the developer?
No, the developers do that, and what we would do is look at an industry standard and take that further and have them comply with a standard so that it's just not a noise study, that it would be a specific type of study. So in the data center applications, there is a specific requirement for a specific type of study. So I'll look and figure out what the specific study is to be used so that it has to be done in accordance with those standards.
Okay, thank you. I'd also like to add that panels containing cadmium telluride shall be prohibited. As well as have on a record a notarized letter executed by a corporate signatory of the developer attesting that the panels do not leach and that they would assume full liability against PFAS contamination of local wells. And I think you might have something about well testing of adjacent property owners, but we should include that in there prior to and annually after completion.
And the well testing would be the responsibility of the
Yes.
applicant.
Yeah, all of the requirements are the responsibility of the applicant. So,
Right.
Yes.
And this might be, I know it was discussed earlier, but it was stricken from the prior ordinance. And agricultural ready condition means the property is ready for agricultural, silvicultural use at the beginning of the next growing cycle. And that was stricken. Can we put that back in? I know the lawyer was just talking about something like, then they can change the use and,
As a part of the decommissioning.
okay,
No, I'm asking the question. Is that we want to put it back as a part of the decommissioning?
okay.
That, I believe that language was removed because the uses are now permitted by special exception, non-agricultural districts. So you wouldn't return a commercial use back to agricultural ready. But I believe if you're saying to add that specific to the district, the agricultural district, then absolutely that would be could be part of returning it to the pre-development condition.
Okay, well, I thought we were changing the zoning so that solar was only allowed in AP zoned property. So that's agricultural.
Correct. It also has to be allowed by special exception in commercial, industrial, institutional districts. So that language previously would have applied to all of those. But specific to the agricultural, the AP district, I think that would be reasonable to include as a part of the pre-development condition.
I'm sorry to take up so much time, but I put a lot of thought into this and I'd like to get it all straight. There's something it's under the decommissioning. There's, I don't know what number it is now, but any changes to the ownership of the project shall require an updated decommissioning plan and surety reflecting the same. Notice shall be provided to the county within 30 days of the sale or transfer of the lease or property. Could we add or panel changes that would give a new assessed value? Sometimes they change the panels out mid-cycle. And a new financial guarantee provided by the new lease owner or property owner. And under site plan, could we also add any area of the project that has threatened or endangered species be excluded? I know they usually do like a survey.
Mhm.
Can we exclude threatened or endangered species?
So any area that is habitat to a threatened or endangered species, yeah.
Thank you.
Uh,
And then I have additional for the energy, section 2, energy storage facilities. Could you listen to this language?
Sure.
For 23.3, the purpose and the intent of the solar energy regulations is to regulate solar energy development so that the public health, safety, and general welfare of county citizens and businesses is protected. Solar energy development, construction, installation, and operation shall not negatively impact agriculture and forested lands, endangered species habitats, conservation lands, scenic views, cultural resources, and other environmentally sensitive lands. These regulations provide land use standards for the underlying zoning district with safeguards to ensure the proper development of facilities that generate electricity by means of solar power. Rather than promoting economic development while mitigating adverse impacts. Additionally, under that, under application requirements, require a data sheet on the exact type and size of the storage device must be included in the application request. And the types of storage components and material being used to include the enclosure as well. Additionally, under general development plan, if we could add no restart of the solar facility if a fire occurs until the storage device is removed from the facility and a complete inspection is done by a third party.
Yeah, I think there's language similar to there, but to
I
that.
think so too.
Yeah, so we'll compare that. I think that language that I'm speaking about is under the emergency action plan approved by the fire chief.
Oh.
And then also in the root cause analysis.
I've seen this in other localities as well proposing, but all the runoff, regarding the runoff from the area of the battery containment, can we put a requirement for energy storage facilities that they shall not be allowed within 1/4 mile of wetlands?
I think we'll have to have a discussion to see if that it runs afoul of the setback requirements, but I don't see any reason why not. I just want to point that out that it might be an issue, but yeah.
Okay, I'll send this to you, but I wanted to also put under 14C about runoff must drain into an on-site storage containment tank, and it should have the capacity to hold 100,000 gallons or more to prevent the loss of water containing hazardous material to escape and allow water to cool down.
Okay.
Additionally, require and record to know the depth of the groundwater at the site, as well as the depth of the substrate at the bottom of the water table. And that there should be water testing prior to construction and annually, as well as immediately following an emergency event, and monthly after that for a 1-year period. And this report should go to the DEQ. And adjacent property wells shall be tested at commencement of construction and monitored should a hazardous event occur. Oh, and also under, I think there's a section under, right in the, under the fiscal analysis report, a real estate value impact study of nearby properties. This could go for the solar ordinance as well, but it needs to be performed by an independent party. and not anyone related to the to the developer.
That is number G, right? Yeah.
And one last thing, and then I'll give you all guys the rest of me. I think we should add a section called restrictions. And I sent you a draft from a gentleman named David Tucker from Isle of Wight. It's in the document under citizen comments, and it's under number 4, restrictions, and there's A through I. If we could adopt all those provisions in there. I don't know if you want me to read them all. Facility will not be permitted to operate as partial or full status during any moment requiring shutdown by monitoring system, emergencies, fire, explosion, et cetera. All materials removed out of the county within 30 days after abandonment. Can I just send all this to you? or-
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah, we have it. Well, yeah, that's fine.
all right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
So I have one question,
Mhm.
and this will probably go again to our lawyer. So, I'm fine with having more restrictions, particularly if they're gonna make things safer. But I know sometimes the county gets sued at a drop of a hat by these companies over nothing. So I just want to be real careful about any language we use. When we say for the safety of the animals, are we being too subjective? It was, in the introduction, that part, and then I think there was one other part. I don't have anything against them personally, but I just want to protect the county and the taxpayer money.
No, I don't, there's not any real concern about including within those purpose and intent, what the commission would recommend, that the board be considering when it adopts this type of policy.
Yeah, I just don't want them to come back and say, well, you're being subjective, what is real safety for the environment,
Right.
that type of thing.
Unfortunately, we can't mitigate against any any risk of litigation, but
Just want to be careful in
yeah.
our language.
I appreciate that, but I wouldn't be concerned about those purpose and intent pieces.
Okay.
Those should come from, where the commission's coming from in developing the regulations.
Anybody else? Got anything?
Did you address, I know she said something about having the water available. Does what she said cover the water tank that, I don't know how much we should ask to be on, but something available.
I like the 20,000 gallon tank per 5 units. And if Chief Loftus thinks 1 in 10 is good, 1 in 5 is better.
And where the water's coming from. Oh, they have to purchase the water.
You want a provision that would not allow them to use groundwater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Or any
All of
public
our water is
utility.
groundwater in the county, yeah.
Right.
So that should cover it.
Anybody else? If nobody else has any questions, I'd like to,
Mr. Williams,
yep,
may I ask one more thing?
well, of
So
course
what are
you
we?
can.
Thank you. So what are we doing about these recommendations from REC as far as inserting these 2 recommendations into our ordinance?
So I actually looked at that email. It's actually a recommendation to insert one item, and it is transmission into the as a use. And as of right now, transmission is not included there. So, that is, letters come from industry people just like letters come from citizens. Citizens want certain things, the industry wants certain things. And so that necessarily means it's going to be in there because they asked for it. And if it doesn't comport with the goal of the ordinance, then it won't be.
Okay, but I thought, like, for example, this H, private energy was inserted.
So that is, what you see right there right now is the existing language that's there. So it's,
The blue is existing language already in the RP ordinance. Public utilities transmission and distribution has always been included in the RP ordinance. The request is for them, for us to add generation. And we did not add generation, but we did exclude substations. The red is new language. The blue has always been existing language.
This is under the PERT. Oh, I guess it's PERT, the planned unit development language.
the plan is PMUD.
Oh, so.
Yeah.
PUD.
That's, yeah. So what does the language say there now? I think there it's. It's not there now. Right. So it's not in the language in the ordinance right now as it is written. So it is something we have to evaluate to see if it's appropriate. And in the PERT, we struck that transmission, distribution and transmission, and created the separate definition for substation. Because like I said earlier, under the prior definitions, substations were captured under that broader definition of public utilities, transmission, distribution, and generation. Now, substations are pulled out and are a specific use. I think where their goal is to, well, that's PERT, okay, yeah. I think where their goal is to have a private energy generation facility as a special use in those other districts.
Well, they've made it very clear that that's what they want to do.
Yeah. And like I said, you know, at this point, I don't know if that comports with what we're trying to do. So I saw that email for the first time here tonight. I haven't given it any analysis at all. So.
Anybody? You good, Mary? It's okay. Trust me. Hey, hard questions are hard to ask, and they need to be asked. Part of what Mr. Hughes is saying, though, we have to act on something tonight, because if we don't act, then July 1, it hits the fan. So with that being said, do I have a motion from anybody? Somebody?
Mr. Chairman, whereas a public necessity, convenience, general welfare, and good zoning practices warrant approval of text 03/2026, I recommend that text 03/2026 be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of approval with the following modifications. The 20,000 gallon tanks per 5 units, along with the various modifications that Commissioner Hodge recommended from the various other ordinances she has found be added to it.
Mr. Chair, I was just gonna say, you can make your motion a lot easier rather than specifically listing each one of those and just say, including the recommendations that the commission has offered tonight to go forward.
Even better,
Yeah.
what he said.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Young. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nays? The ayes have it. The motion moves forward. Thank you. Whew. Mr. Hughes.
Yeah, so the last item on the, to talk about is any and all matters. And so we've talked about amendments to the comp plan. And so what I would just ask is that the commission initiate amendments to the comp plan related to policy regarding solar and energy storage facilities, so that we can bring that to you all for adoption.
We need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. There you go, Mr. Hughes. You have it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Any and all matters, anything additional? That was it. Thank you. I so moved that we adjourn until July 23rd, 2026, our next regular meeting. All those in favor? Anybody got a motion? I'm sorry. I was ready to call it. Do we have a motion?
I move that we close till July the 23rd, 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Young. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? The ayes have it. We'll see you all July 23rd.